Hello and welcome to the program for the 23rd of March 2021, which is the 11th of Adar 5781 in our calendar. Israel, as well as some parts of the US, are in the midst of a very cold spell, which at least allowed some outdoor activity for our children who could play in the snow, which here only remains in the higher elevations. This cold weather is particularly dangerous for our elderly population, including Holocaust survivors, some of whose budget does often not extend to pay for heating and all other necessities, a blot on our administration. As the COVID-generated lockdown has been eased, I urge you to visit your elderly neighbor and make sure that they are comfortable. I found one lady of 80 wrapped in blankets sitting in a room of barely 17 degrees Celsius, while the outside temperature was 2 degrees. Today's short program deals almost exclusively with Israel's internal politics centered on our forthcoming election on March 23rd. I sense the frustration and confusion of the population, who, instead of being presented with clear choices and definitive policies, are bombarded with mutual criticism by all political parties of each other's leaders and policies. Only negatives rather than positives, a sign of purposeless drifting. Here's my assessment of where we stand. Today, we are 1 month before our fourth general election in 2 years. But once again, the electorate is kept in the dark about the detailed policy of most participating parties. Search for the mandate of Likud, and all you learn is that it's a right-wing political party. The term is so broad that it could mean aiming to extend complete sovereignty over Judea, Samaria and the Jordan Valley, or on the other hand, like the Trump plan, incorporating as part of Israel isolated locations within the Palestinian state. The voter for that party has no idea what its legislative plans are. It relies totally on only Bibi, blind loyalty. 1 week prior to the election in September 2019, in a speech that was broadcast live on Israel's main TV channels, Netanyahu declared, "Today I announce my intention, after the establishment of a new government, to apply Israeli sovereignty to the Jordan Valley and the northern Dead Sea. The area is Israel's eastern border." It is patently clear that it was nothing but a ploy to siphon votes from those parties that have long declared that intention. Today, as we are about to vote, I say for the first time ever, Prime Minister, you did not speak the truth, and you cannot be trusted again. Netanyahu also reaffirmed the pledge to annex all the settlements that Israel has established in Judea and Samaria. He added, however, that this step could take longer and required maximum coordination with Washington. Because Trump's priority was his re-election, Netanyahu allowed that decision to evaporate. On reflection, it is doubtful if he really meant it. Now, the new President of the United States, Joe Biden, is unlikely to support such a move. Like before every election in Israel, failed or new would-be leaders emerged to start new political parties. This year it's Gideon Sa'ar, former Likud number 2 to Prime Minister Netanyahu, who served as Education Minister and Minister of the Interior. Following a long period away from politics, he now started the New Hope Party to challenge for the country's leadership. In conversation with Rob Satloff of the Washington Institute, Sa'ar said, and I quote, "The current Prime Minister failed in bringing back stability even though he led a 70-something coalition in the Knesset. But, unfortunately, He preferred his interests over the good of the country. Unfortunately, we are facing a situation where a cult of personality came instead of principles and values. Saar went on to say, we need a government that will not rely on extremists, a reference to Bezalel Smotrich's religious Zionism party and his allies. This is what he said about the corona pandemic. Israelis don't think this government has succeeded in managing the crisis. We've had a lot of issues, from failure in enforcement of law to failure to check those people who come from abroad through our one international airport. People are not satisfied with the way the government hasn't worked enough so that the kids are able to go to school. End of quote. What we heard from Saar so far is criticism of Netanyahu and general platitudes of what the country needs, but no details of his own definitive plans. Only on the issue of the two-state solution was he clear and explicit, when he said, how can we protect the security of the citizens of Israel with a sovereign state in the heart of our land, a few miles from the most populated areas in our country, he said. We uprooted all civil and military presence in the Gaza Strip. Since then, we did not get more stability and security, we got less. More from Gideon Saar. I support the maximum autonomy of the Palestinians to rule their life with a minimum ability to harm the security of the State of Israel. This can be the formula. End of quote. But that too requires a great deal more clarification. During the Great Depression of the 1930s, there was Prime Minister Richard Bennett, the leader of the Conservative Party in Canada, promoting his re-election. He too went frequently on the airways to extol his virtues and capabilities, like today's other main player in Israel's forthcoming election, Naftali Bennett, who heads the Yamina party. Israel is also in the midst of a depression of the people who are at the end of their tether, caused by the coronavirus. There is urgent need for policies that bring us back to normality. But Bennett's policies are muddy and have never been clearly spelled out. Until the emergence of New Hope, he was riding high with ambitions to become Prime Minister, and now he ranks below Gideon Saar. Yamina has one important asset. She is their number two, Ayelet Shaked, astute politician and former Minister of Justice from 2015 to 19, with a determination like that of a pit bull. Her resolve to bring Judea, Samaria and the Jordan Valley totally within Israel's sovereignty is being restrained by the ambitions of her leader. Rumors abound that Bennett is considering all options, including some sort of alliance with centrists and even left-wing parties, to form a voting bloc that will unseat Netanyahu and bring him to power. Bennett, who started in concert with the Jewish Home Party and presented himself as religious Zionist, has fallen prey to ambitions of leadership and in the process abandoned his original supporters. This program's request for an interview with Naftali Bennett is still without a reply. About the Palestinian-Arab problem, he said, "There's 2 million Palestinians that govern themselves. They have their own parliament, their own government, their own elections, their own tax system. I don't want to govern the Palestinians. No one does. They already govern themselves." This ambiguous statement leaves the Yamina sympathizer completely in the dark about the direction that Bennett is leading the party and could bring about a split. Bennett, too, has not put a clear policy before the Israeli electorate, but thought to satisfy the electorate with empty rhetoric, like, quote, "The time has come for change. Israel needs new leadership. Therefore, I am running for Prime Minister to finally bring that change, so Israel will have leadership that sees its citizens and not itself." End of quote. All very unsatisfactory and devoid of substance. It seems to be a tradition that former IDF chiefs of staff, following the mandatory period of exclusion from political office, become members of Knesset and are appointed to cabinet positions. Few are successful in politics. Commanding an army with executive powers is far different from running a country with a measure of accountability to the citizens. Nevertheless, they all try it and form political parties that usually last until the next election. Recently it was retired Chief of Staff Benny Gantz who established Blue and White, a coalition of his Israel Resistance Party with Telem, led by former Chief of Staff Moshe Ya'alon, joined by Gabi Ashkenazi, who also served as Chief of Staff, and Yair Lapid's Yesh Atid. In good old Israeli fashion, the policies of the party leaders diverged when Gantz saw an opportunity of advancement and cooperated with Netanyahu so that he was given the position of defense minister and alternate prime minister, with an arrangement to take over as prime minister after 18 months, a forlorn hope from the start. With the declaration of this election in March, that arrangement is now void, and so is the manifesto of the former three-party alliance, which included rescinding laws barring businesses from opening on Shabbat. For the new election, no definitive policy statement for Benny Gantz's Resilience Party has been issued. Of that alliance, besides Gantz, only Yair Lapid and his Yesh Atid party have made it to this election. It is also only Yesh Atid that has published a detailed policy statement of several pages. It covers the following sections: fight public corruption, economy and society, education, healthcare, religion and state, welfare, protecting the environment, Holocaust survivors, minorities in Israel, and Aliyah and absorption. These sections are divided into subsections that provide a very detailed picture of the policy of Yair Lapid. It is, of course, easier to make such statements than to fulfill what they promise, but he leaves the public in no doubt about his plans. It is then at the voter's discretion to decide with how many he agrees or disagrees. Several other centre-left and far-left parties have also thrown their hat into the ring. The aims and objects of the religious Shas and United Torah Judaism parties are well known, and their support varies only minimally, assuring them of several Knesset seats each. Finally, a brief word about the incessant opinion polls published to sway the voter in one or another direction. In my opinion, they serve no useful purpose because the samples are far too small and by telephone are hit and miss. Because of COVID, polling by telephone does not determine a fair cross-section. Furthermore, unlike by face-to-face polling, the interviewer cannot assess the sincerity of the respondent. For me, only the final poll counts on March 23rd. And now, a change of subject, but no less relevant. Last week's additional Torah reading, the Haftarah, highlights the theme of the Almighty's command to destroy the people of Amalek for their unprovoked attack on the Israelites as they travelled in the wilderness, following the exodus from Egypt. Years later, on God's instruction, the army of Israel waged war against the Amalekites to avenge this horrendous crime and destroyed them all, except their king and his belongings, a mistake admonished by God. In every generation since, there arose enemies of the Jewish people determined to destroy us, but we always stand at the grave of our persecutors. Now we are approaching the festival of Purim, commemorating and indeed celebrating the defeat of the evil Haman, a vizier of the Persian Empire under King Ahasuerus. Haman and his sons were intent to kill all the Jews. His plan can be compared to the perpetrators of the actions in the 20th century. Once again, we are facing an enemy with the same intentions, this time too close for comfort. Israel's irresolute attitude to deal decisively with our neighbors, to eliminate its leaders, educate its masses, and install a democratic local administration will become more difficult and dangerous as time passes. The Allies learned from their mistake of the Versailles Treaty in 1918 and did it successfully in Germany after World War II. And with that warning, I end this shorter than usual program, but hope to be back on the 9th of March. Until then, this is Walter Bingham wishing you a good week and a happy, if restricted, celebration of Purim. And once again, please don't forget your elderly neighbor in this cold weather. Goodbye.